Hey everyone, Greg Cazillo from Cazillo.com. This week's Keep Shooting Monday is packed. First thing I want to remind you guys to head over to Cazillo.com. Make sure you fill out the survey at this link. I was browsing the web this week and found this really interesting article over on Professional Photographer magazine talking about posing, and the photographer I agree with 100%. That it's great to pose. We really need to concentrate on posing and getting a great photograph, but we don't want to overpose. So head over to Professional Photographer Magazine's website, take a look at this article, and let me know what you think. Next thing I wanted to mention is the assignment. Don't forget about this week's assignment, which is duplicate. I need you to duplicate a photo, find something, whether it's mine, whether it's another photographer's. Could be a still life, could be a portrait, whatever you want to find. Duplicate that photo as practice and then add a little bit of flair to it. Post them over onto the forum, and I believe they need to be up by March 1st at 5 p.m. in order to be eligible for the following week's Keep Shooting Monday video post for them to be up in there. So that's not very far away. That is only a week and a half away or something. I don't know. Anyway, doesn't matter. Next thing we need you to do, I'm looking for some little clips of video, maybe a little testimonial, like 5 seconds long, 10 seconds long, because YouTube is actually changing the design of the YouTube channels. So I want to experiment with something, see if we can make a really cool trailer. So send me some video, some photos, some stuff. I think it'll be really neat, before and after maybe. But I really need some kind of audio or video explanation of what's going on. If you had any ideas for me, I'd love to hear them. So comment down here in the video. And yeah, so I want to check that out. Last thing, I think the only thing I missed in my intro today is Cazillion questions. But let me look because I forgot. Got that. Yep, Cazillion questions time. What would you suggest more, using a flash or a reflector to fill light? I thought of that to avoid the flash sync speed problem. Well, Italian reviewer, there are a time and a place for both reflectors and strobe. So you need to be able to think about both. If you really want to be a competent photographer, to be able to handle just about any situation, you need to be able to use both and combinations of both in the same photograph. Actually, in this segment, last week's video on Thursday, I put up a video on using reflectors. And I also have a lot of really cool stuff coming up very soon on flash. So, yeah, it's all coming, I promise. But you need to be able to use both. From Adam, what would be the best time to use white balance or gels? Adam, last week's Keep Shooting Monday, I talked about using gels, when I would use them, when I wouldn't. Here's a link over to that video. As far as white balance, I think what you mean is when would you set a custom white balance, and I never set a custom white balance. If I do need to set a custom white balance or get a really super accurate color, I'll use a gray card, and that's it. I have no need personally to set custom white balance. I think it's a big waste of time. Every time the light changes, the sun starts to go down a little bit, your white balance needs to change. So I just don't see any need for it, and that's why I don't do it. Question from Andy. Do you mainly shoot in auto or manual? I have 2 weddings coming up, and they're my first. I shoot with a 5D Mark II. Good luck with your weddings, Andy. Make sure you have my wedding photography checklist on hand and ready to go when you are heading over to those weddings. Here's a link over to that. I shoot manual probably 90% of the time, I'd say. I am not a fan of auto, and the only auto mode that I will use is aperture priority because I want to control my bokeh, control the entire scene, what it looks like. Just not a fan of auto ISO, or I will use auto ISO, referring back to the earlier question about white balance, or auto white balance. Sorry, I'm all mixed up today. I will use auto white balance all the time. I never, ever use auto ISO. Here's a link to that video, and I just prefer to be on manual. Gives me more control. I know exactly where I'm at. check my histogram once in a while. By the way, here's a histogram video if you don't know how to use that. And so hopefully that'll help. But make sure you get that checklist. I'd love to recreate the image you have done with the child looking up on the bike. The black and white. Love the lighting, although I wouldn't know where to start. Well, Mr. Yawn 1, it's actually really, really simple. It is one single strobe hanging above him, pointing down with a 4-foot softbox, probably just out of camera shot, so probably about 4 foot off the ground. It was actually lower than me, and just to keep the good amount of light. So it wasn't real high, just one solid softbox pointing straight down. That's where you get that circular pattern of light hitting the ground. Now in the background, it's actually a cyc wall, which is a curved wall, curved white wall. You can do the same thing with a roll of paper. And so that's it, man. It's one strobe pointing down, big softbox, done. Black and white, a little bit of touch up, and a good pose, a cute subject. It's my nephew, by the way. That's Alex. And he was 3, I think. Shot that a long time ago. That was like 2005 or 2006. Anyway, that's it. One light, pointed down, big softbox with a strobe, done. This past week, Nikon announced the new D7100 camera body. There are a lot of good things on this, and I've been doing some reading on forums, on different blogs and things about this camera, and so I have some thoughts about this in general. The first thing that I know everyone is going to be asking me, and I must get this question a dozen times a week, is either what camera should I buy, or should I go with full frame? And so I want to talk about that a little bit too. Now, first let's talk about the specs that are here a little bit. The main differences between the D7000 and the 7100 seems to be, number one, the higher ISO quality and the better sensor. The 24 megapixels versus, I think the other one was 12 or 16. I forget which. I think I had it here. 16 was the old one. And the huge upgrade in the autofocus, which as I've read in a few places, it's going to be equivalent to the D4, which is awesome. Every camera needs a great autofocus system because it makes our lives just so much easier. Now, the other big thing, the movie mode, frame rate is the same, display size slightly bigger, slightly less battery life, not really a big deal because most people are going to either add a grip or are going to buy a second battery anyway. And 100% viewfinder coverage, which I think is going to be awesome. Now, to talk about the point with regards to what camera should I buy. Typically, I say this, and this goes to everyone, so I'm going to be forwarding this to a lot of people all the time, sending them over to this segment of video. Number one, do not go full frame until you have good glass. If you do not have good glass, that full frame camera is going to be a waste. The quality of that full frame and even the quality of this sensor is really going to show with a crappy piece of glass with some, inexpensive, cheap. You're really going to notice it. If you, if you don't have a 24-70 or a 70-200 from any manufacturer or any fixed glass, you're not going to get that performance out. And, you have this new great autofocus system with a D7100, but those old lenses are not going to be able to really take advantage of it until you have the better glass to go with it. So you always want to spend more money on glass rather than on a body. All right, so concentrating on getting better glass first, upgrading that. And then what I typically say is when you are ready to upgrade a body, find your images just are okay, maybe you just need a little step up. Take a look at the specs of the camera at that time when you're ready to buy, figure it out, and then always go up one model. So if you have a D7000 now, I do not recommend buying a D7100. Then you would want to go up to a D600. Two more things I wanted to mention about this camera. Number one, if you are looking at these specs and you're saying to yourself, okay, I don't like the frames per second, I don't like the buffer, I don't like this, I don't like that, it doesn't have a CF card, or it doesn't have this or that other thing, then you know what? You're looking at the wrong camera. you need to step up. You need to go to the next body. You need to go full frame. You need to get a look at the 600 or maybe even the 800, okay? The new 7100 specs don't wow you, then don't buy the camera. Don't look at the camera. This is not the camera for you. The 7000 and below are consumer cameras. The D300, D200, D100, D600 and above are pro cameras. So keep in mind what you are purchasing. If those specs don't match up with what you need, then don't even waste your time on it. Don't sit there on the blogs and the forums and this and that and complain that, oh, the D7100 doesn't have a 500 photo buffer. Give me a break. Just pay attention to what you're buying and buy the right camera instead of just being one of those complainers on the internet. Seems like there's millions of those. Just go out and buy the right camera, look at the right camera. Now, as far as the cameras that Nikon is putting out, I think in the last year and a half that they've talked about and announced, I think they're doing it right. I like the fact that they have all full frame cameras from the D600 up, and then all of the DX and smaller sensor cameras from the D7000 and below. Sorry, new now 7100 and below. So I think they're going the right way. They've moved in the right direction, and I commend them for it because I think it's a good decision. So if you have questions about it, I don't really want to make this a comment thread and arguing about the new 7100 camera, but I'm sure there's going to be plenty of people talking about it, so that can't necessarily be a bad thing. So I hope you enjoyed this new segment for Keep Shooting Monday. So I'm going to do my best to keep updating you about new lenses, new equipment, new things that are coming out. In case you missed it, last week's video on Thursday was about how to use a reflector. I'm actually using a reflector in this scene right now to bring a little bit of light back into my face over here to cut down on the shadow. But a lot of people prefer to use the DIY method, so I thought I would mention it, that I often use the DIY method when it comes to reflectors also. My selection is pretty broad. Anything that's going to reflect the light, whether it's colorful or not, will usually work, especially if it's a color or a shade that I want to reflect into the scene of that particular photo. The main one that I'm going to use are going to be a whiteboard. This is just a simple piece of foam core. Nothing special about it. It's just white foam core. The great thing about it is it's cheap. I can go to Staples. I can go anywhere and pick some of it up. Walmart. Cut it down. If I'm doing product photography, I can cut it down and just get a tiny little reflection, or I can use the big, huge piece for it. Either way, foam core works great. Here is a piece of black foam core. All right, same idea. We talked about reflectors, how to use it. This is going to take light out of the scene. If you needed a little bit of light, then maybe you move the white out a little bit, or you go with a gray foam core. Same idea. Another great reflector and another great scrim is just fabric. I'm not sure if you can hear that ambulance or fire truck in the background as it's going by. Okay, anyway, now it's gone. I will often use big white sheets. Sheets work well, but sometimes if you go to Joann Fabrics or another fabric store, getting actual material may work better for a scrim, which is going to diffuse light. You put that in between your light source and your subject. But this is one that I have used in the past as a reflector. I put this underneath brides' dresses if they didn't want to get dirty. I've done all kinds of stuff with this. Just a simple white sheet that wasn't very expensive, but regular old fabric works just fine. One other thing that I use are mirrors. Mirrors work great when shooting product photography. These are a couple of just plexiglass mirrors, so I'm not going to accidentally break them, or if I drop them on the ground, I'm not going to have 7 years of bad luck. I just went to my local picture framer, or I think it was a picture framer or a glass shop probably, and said, hey, do you have any scraps of mirrors? And here they are, a couple of mirrors, and perfect size. If I needed smaller ones, I could cut them down if I had to, or break them if I had to, and wouldn't be the end of the world. They weren't super expensive in the first place. And by the way, my little bit of blue tape reminding me that it is my equipment. So questions, comments, whatever you have for me, let me hear it. We'll see you next week for another Keep Shooting Monday. Until then, Greg Cazillo, Cazillo.com. Thanks, guys. Keep shooting.